Hi, I'm Johnny Hedgepeth.
And I'm Travis Woloshyn.
And we're here to talk about Legends of Tomorrow. Now, I know that this show is airing on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, but since we own the feed, we can do whatever we want. And guaranteed, we're probably going to mention wrestling at some point or another during every one of these shows, as we're wrestling fans. Most of you know me as Johnny Sorrow, but since that's a wrestling thing, I figure I'm going to just use my real name for the first time ever.
I like it. Breaking kayfabe.
Yeah. Nice. And I'm joined by Travis here. And the reason I wanted to do this show, I wanted to get this out of the way before we get started, explain this to everybody, is I'm a comic book geek. Old school comic book geek. Therefore, my favorite television shows are the DC shows on the CW. Cheesy acting, iffy special effects. I don't care. I think they've got the most heart of anything on TV, and they're the most true to the source material. And of all these shows, Legends of Tomorrow is my flat-out favorite, because over the course of 5 seasons, it has evolved from a first season that was an entertaining train wreck to the 5th season where it's highly lauded as the show having the most fun on television. So for this journey, I reached out, Travis reached out back to me, and Travis, you've never seen this show, right?
I had not. However, I mean, my background is not dissimilar to yours. Although I grew up with much more of, I was a comic book geek as well, had much more of a connection to the Marvel Universe with, a tertiary, no, I shouldn't say that. Like, I still had DC Comics around. I just didn't dig into the lore as much, as I did with Marvel. So I was excited for that possibility. That's why I got excited to work with you on this. Number 2, I live in Vancouver, and I'm an actor like yourself. I have read for, I think I mentioned earlier, I've read for a lot of the DC shows out here. I've never been cast. I was on hold for Batwoman, but I've read for, I think I told you, Arrow and Supergirl and Flash. I've read for all those shows. I've never read for Legends of Tomorrow. So, I mean, this is just, basically I'm looking for any sort of back door. That's the only reason I took up this opportunity. It's like, I'm
thinking, if this takes off, if this, we get a little steam going here,
that's right.
It could be out, man.
Yeah, I think we'll make an appearance like sometime as like critics of some sort of movie that's come out in their universe or something. You know what I mean? That's our end game.
Oh, believe you me, by the time this hits the 5th season, it's the most meta show on television.
Yeah. From what you told me, no, and then now again, and hearing you, talk it up as you have, got me interested for sure. So there's like, and shit, Johnny, I got nothing going on right now. I'm like everybody else.
Pandemic.
Yeah. Like normally my wife would be like, "No, you're not doing another fucking podcast." But she's like, "Sure, yeah, fine, go ahead, get out of my face."
So I know I buried the lead on what we're going to call this show, and I was really struggling with it, and it occurred to me. Now I don't know, Travis. I don't know how familiar you are with this, but one of my favorite podcasts, and it was a very well-known podcast, was Gilmore Guys. And the initial premise of Gilmore Guys was one of the hosts, Kevin, was a huge, longtime fan of Gilmore Girls, and the other host, Demi, had never seen it. And they went through every episode, had guests. It became a bit of a sensation. One of my favorite podcasts in the world.
Sounds great.
So I was thinking about it. Nothing rolled off the tongue. And I'm like, fuck it. I mean, I've even called into Kevin's, his current show is called Good Christian Fun. It's wonderful. Him and Caroline Neely host that. I've been called into that show.
Yeah.
We've emailed a few times, and I don't think he'd mind. We're going to call this show Gideon Guys.
I like it.
Because if anyone who's watched the show knows, they're basically a rotating cast. This over the course of the 5 seasons, it's very much a rotating cast. But one of the central characters is Gideon, who is the AI on the spaceship they fly around on called the Wave Rider. And with a sexy British voice.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gideon guys.
Works for me.
That's what we're gonna do. That's what we're calling it, people.
I like it.
You
I
know?
like it. I mean,
So-
I never heard the podcast, but the premise sounds eerily similar. I was a Gilmore Girls fan until I didn't watch the last season. It was after Espenson left.
Well, no, that is definitely. But by the way, listeners, this show that Travis and I are doing here, we're going to be going off the rails so often, talking about things that have nothing to do with it. Get ready. It's going to be a roller coaster. Basically, the first season of Legends of Tomorrow is described as a train wreck that was trying to find its voice. That's what this is going to be.
Also, we are, pot enthusiasts in two parts of the world where it is, it's a delicacy but it's definitely legal so that could, stream of consciousness, that sort of thing. We might be like, wait, what the hell were we talking about? And we may have to pause and go back and figure it out or something like that.
Oh, definitely. Well, amongst all the different essential services going on during the crisis here, our pot stores are open for business.
Yeah. No, same thing here.
But
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm keen to get started here, man. I'm along for the growing pains that I'm sure there will be.
Okay. We're going to be more awkward than the Hawks dialogue for our first few episodes here.
Yeah.
For those who maybe are tuning in who've never watched Legends of Tomorrow, which seems odd, but it's definitely possible. People listen to all kinds of shit. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a rundown, maybe give you Travis a little background.
Yeah.
DW shows, it was started, of course, with Arrow, and Arrow was a big hit. And it's funny, I didn't watch Arrow.
Wait, can I stop you really quick? Here's what I was going to ask. So not Supernatural, because that's another Vancouver show. Smallville is not part of the DCU?
No, okay. But that's very much, well.
Okay, wait. Well, that's exciting. I like that. I like that answer.
Okay, well, wait till we get to season 5.
Right.
And Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Cool.
We're not giving anything away.
Yeah.
The recent Crisis on Infinite Earths they did on all of these shows, they brought in every single possible actor who's ever played anybody on a TV version of anything DC.
That's really cool.
And made that part of the Infinite Universe. So the Smallville universe is canon.
Is represented. Cool.
However, when Arrow started originally, because you watched Smallville.
I didn't, man. I would say the last DC show I watched was Lois and Clark, man. Like going back that far. I haven't watched any of the newer DC shows, even Living Here. That's the other thing too.
Yeah, well, even there on Supergirl, the actor who plays Supergirl's father or played Supergirl's father on that show is what's his name who played Superman on Lois.
Dean Cain. Yeah. I think I'd heard that. That's funny.
They love to. Greg Berlanti is the mastermind of all these shows. He's the executive producer, and he is a comic book geek, and so are the people he hires. So they love to throw in Easter eggs. So we're going to be spotting so many little Easter eggs, and they love to use actors and actresses, who've already been in the universe. But so originally they introduced Green Arrow in Smallville. Towards the end of the Smallville's run, they went for a show that originally was like, we're not going to have any costumes. They went hard into costumes towards the end.
Yeah.
And really wanted to do a spin-off of Green Arrow with that character, with that actor. Mm-hmm. It didn't work out, so they started Arrow. I didn't like Arrow at first because to me it looked like typical, let's distance ourselves from the source material, sort of a show.
Right.
So I didn't care for it. I didn't realize what they were going for.
What year is this? What year are we at here? What year did Arrow debut?
It would be, 2006. I don't even know.
Like how many? Like has Iron Man hit yet? Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to think of like that. Like what's the entertainment? Thing at that time. Have superhero movies become a big thing at this point? Like it's post Spider-Man 2.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it's And it was right around when Iron Man hit.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it leads into one of the funniest things I always say about these shows is the DC movies, for the most part, are garbage. But the DC TV shows are outstanding. It's like if you could give the DC TV shows the budget to make those movies, we'd really see something. But anyway, so Arrow was on for a while, but then they introduced the Flash in Arrow and spun it off into the Flash. And the Flash is one of my favorite characters. I love the Flash. So I started watching that, which then got me into watching Arrow. And then they introduced Supergirl. And then they spun off Legends of Tomorrow. And what they did is they'd introduce a lot of tertiary characters in Arrow and in Flash.
Right.
And they were looking to create an anthology show, like maybe be different every season. You know, they didn't even know what they were doing yet. And so they took a bunch of these characters and they needed something to do with them. So they introduced the character Rip Hunter. Now, Rip Hunter is a time master. And he flies around in a ship called the Wave Rider. And he's a real character from the comics, so obscure. It's amazingly obscure character.
Yeah. Has this affected the comics in which he made his first appearance? Like, have they become more valuable?
You know, I have no idea, but I used to have an issue of Rip Hunter Time Master from like 1962 or 63, and all is the cover is he and his team who are wearing green jumpsuits. You know, it's early 60s. It's Rip Hunter and his gal pal and the teenage boy who, you know, and confronting George Washington for having sold us out to the Redcoats.
Unreal. He saved history. That's crazy. Rip Hunter.
He's saving history since the early 60s.
Right. That's great.
Granted, he wasn't played by Arthur Darvill or looked anything like him, who, before this show, he was on a time traveling show. You a Doctor Who fan?
Not really. No. I mean, I'm not adverse to it. I just never got into it. British sci-fi is something that's pretty... I never dug into it too much that I can think of in general.
Well, we here at our house got into New Who, as it were. Yeah. Because number one, it had oh gosh, the actor's name has escaped me, but he was on Doctor Who for a while. He was one of the guys in Harry Potter. Anyway, very entertaining. So they regenerated him out and brought in this young hot Doctor Who, and his sidekicks were a girl and her fiance. The fiance being his name was Rory, of all things, and he was played by Arthur Darvill. So after that stint ended, his next stint is as another time traveler. So
that's funny.
That was coincidence or and then we're like, hey, you know, it'd be cool.
That's funny.
But anyway, the gist is, and it opens with, let me bring this up because all the DC shows up until this year had these intros where one of the characters is giving you the background of everything to introduce you into the show.
Right.
And this is the season one. It's in 2166, an immortal tyrant named Vandal Savage conquered the world and murdered my wife and child. I have assembled an elite team to hunt him throughout time and stop his rise to power. Unfortunately, my plan is opposed by the body I'd sworn my allegiance to, the Time Master. How much exposition is in this?
Yes, yeah. Like I told in an earlier discussion with Johnny how much my sister despises anything with time travel. So I can tell you, like at that point already, it's click. She's just clicking the channel, not a chance.
In the future, my friends may not be heroes, but if we succeed, they will be remembered as legends.
Yeah.
It's cheesy with a capital C.
Yeah. You know? But count me in, bro. The second Blitz, 2166.
It opens with London's being under attack.
Yeah.
By spaceships and laser beams, And as Travis said, the second Blitz.
That's what it said. Yeah.
And this is when we meet our villain, Vandal Savage, who had been introduced on The Flash. Because they did a two-parter on Flash and Arrow that introduced Hawkman and Hawkgirl and Vandal Savage to give a little background to the show.
Right. Was this like the previous season or like? Yeah. Okay. So he's fresh. He's fresh in everybody's mind.
Yeah, like and we're going to get into this during the show. A lot of the criticisms of the first season, a lot of them have to do with the choice of villain. Is Vandal Savage and the diminutive,
yes.
short.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what actor he reminds me of. It's like totally an 80s, like kind of a diehard type, not villain, but that kind of the guy who kind of sells him out, who are like, come on, Johnny, the cokehead, yeah, that kind of guy. That's what he reminds me of a bit. But there's somebody else from that era.
Except Danish.
Yes. Yeah.
Because as we'll explain, now Vandal Savage, longtime DC mega villain.
Yeah, this is when it was somebody I needed you to look up, or you knew about already, and I'm glad you did.
Longtime DC mega villain. I was very excited when they introduced him, and I have to own up. I watched this first season when it aired, and I was like, this is perfect. I love every bit of this. It's perfect. Mm-hmm. And then I watched it again and went, okay, it's bumpy here and there. Mm-hmm. I've since watched it again, and I can look at it with honest eyes and go, yeah, it's a little bumpy. But think about it, how many shows, and this is one of the pluses of being on the CW, they'll give a show time to find itself.
Yeah.
Back in the day, that's what used to happen. Watch the early seasons of how many shows that you go, oof, that was rough. And it takes a while for them to find their voice.
Mm-hmm. And I think that they figured out that they have a built-in audience there, that it's like, well, shit, we don't have any other, are there any other CW shows that make any noise these days? Like,
yeah. Well, Supernatural. You know?
Yeah. Is that's still on? Wild. Yeah. I've done Supernatural. I did an episode of Supernatural.
You did an episode of Supernatural?
Yeah. I was a waiter at a like this like new age cafe where you always gave like an affirmation after you give their order. My line to Jensen Ackles was one of them was you are a beautiful virile manifestation of the divine. After I drop off his pancakes, it's pretty good.
That's great. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The next episode of Legends this season has a Supernatural Legends crossover.
Wild. Insane,
but
man.
Not the characters, just the car.
Ha, that's funny. That's hilarious. That's great, man. The CW, like, good for them. It's like a bunch of kids just hanging out and doing stuff together. Hey?
It really is.
In Vancouver, British Columbia.
It really is. I mean, Kevin Smith loves these shows. He's directed a bunch. Right. So it goes to show you about potheads who like comic books and these TV shows. Mm-hmm. But no, CW has going on. I mean, they've got their superhero shows, Supernatural, which is in
Riverdale. Is it Riverdale CW?
Riverdale is CW, and Riverdale falls under the same umbrella because Berlanti makes that too.
Yeah, cool.
So they're all Greg Berlanti and his people run that network at this point, and because you can look at the ratings. Like I looked at the ratings for season 1 here; they start high and end low. They just go lower and lower and lower all the way down to the last episode of the season, and they get renewed because it's the CW. What else? They don't have anything.
Yeah, and I guess it's like in terms of investment and revenue, they must be doing fine. They must be doing peachy keen in terms of how much these budgets are. I mean, yeah, they're cheesy budgets, but it's like no cheesier than I don't know if you were a Buffy fan, right, Johnny?
No, I wasn't.
No, because like to me, because like that's I was a huge Buffy fan. Probably the most I've ever cared about a show. Maybe that and Lost are the two shows that I was just like, I watched them all the way to the end kind of thing. Even for the warts and all kind of thing. I usually, there's other shows I may have given up on, but I didn't have the love of my heart that I did for those shows. But this follows a Buffy model, I think, and I guess that I would wager that a lot of these shows do, and I think that kind of set a tone for like what is like kind of like the team, or like a main character who's your main hero, and then enough of an ensemble around them kind of thing, and making cute little jokes like we're gonna get into here. I think that that it does kind of follow a model that was set up back then that I think has become no problem.
Hold on, we're gonna leave this in the show because this is part of any one of my shows is my dog asking me to go upstairs. So
I love it.
We're just gonna hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no, but with Buffy, they had set up, like, it was a thing that, like I said, worked at sometimes and sometimes it didn't, but there was a formula that I bet you has become fairly safe in terms of this genre of show.
Well, very much so, especially with these shows, these DC shows, because Supergirl, Flash, and Arrow, and Black Lightning, which is one of the newer ones.
And what about Batwoman? Isn't that not
Batwoman,
or Batgirl, or is it Batwoman or Batgirl?
It's Batwoman.
Batwoman, that's right. Of course.
Yeah, the sexy lesbian Batwoman.
Whew, goodness gracious! I was on hold for that show, and I would have had a scene with her, and I didn't end up getting it. Well, in a way, I was kind of relieved because I would not have been able to hold it together. She is drop dead gorgeous. Drop dead gorgeous.
Yes, she is. But they all. It is that same thing. They're all team shows. Like Arrow and Flash. Arrow, which just ended this season. It had a huge cast that eventually was like, here's the team of heroes.
Cool.
With Arrow.
Yeah.
Supergirl has a team with her. The Flash has a team with him. Like for instance, the Flash's team is essentially with Killer Frost, Vibe, and the Elongated Man. And various other characters.
Wild. That's great.
So that's exactly right. It's not just here's your hero and that's it. It's every one of these shows is a team show.
Yeah.
So it is that Buffy.
And I'm gonna guess right now that it also kind of follows the old X-Files model of. I bet you, like, we will have, like, as you mentioned, the Crisis on Infinite Earths, so we will have, like, the long story arcs, but I bet you we'll have your kind of Monsters of the Week type things. Yeah, that's, and that was a big Buffy thing as well. But you know what I mean. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, there's always a big bad. In all these, there's always a big bad, and, which is, right, that's a Buffy reference.
Right.
And, but there's also solo ones and smaller. It really, this show really, Legends, as it goes on to other seasons, that is really the first 5 of a season are standalones where they're planting the seeds for the big bad.
Cool.
And then halfway through that kicks in and becomes, and there's always MacGuffins. That becomes a Legends thing. There's always, we have to go through history and find this and find that, and we need all of these things.
I love it, man.
This first season doesn't quite have as much of that, though.
Yeah.
Because it really is finding itself. So we're going to get back to the second Blitz.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Goodness gracious.
And, just give you the little background of Rip Hunter.
Yeah. Rip Hunter.
So, you got Vandal Savage there, and he's confronting, which we find out is Rip Hunter's wife and his young child. And the kid and Vandal Savage, just to show you how evil this character is. And this is something you could say. I don't know if the actor's name is Casper Crump, I believe, and whether or not he's a success or not, we'll see. But as far as establishing him being evil, first thing he does, kills Rip's wife. The little boy is standing up to him, and he gets in his face. He's like, "Oh, your mother was very brave." He's like, "Now, are you foolish like your father?" And the little kid spits in his face, and he wipes it, and then he kills the child.
Yeah.
Like a 4-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Kills him.
Yeah. Welcome on board. Here we go.
Welcome on board to what eventually becomes the funnest show on TV.
Yeah. But there's your hook, man. Yeah.
So then you got the Time Masters are so cheesy. You have
We should
Rip
mention.
Hunter.
So we're getting. I mean, you're talking about Rip Hunter. You're also kind of mentioned. We're talking about the opening scene of the entire series, right? And we did want to. You had mentioned, as I said, I'm in Vancouver. I recognize where this opening scene takes place.
Right, this is a part of the show that we're going to call. Travis is going to call. What do we say?
I can see my house from here. Wasn't that something like that? You can see Travis's house.
Travis can see his house. And he's going to point out all of the look. Now, this may look, to my eye, I thought this was London in 2116, but apparently it's Vancouver.
I thought it was 2166. Anyways, this is in the core of downtown Vancouver. It's a place called Victory Square. It's kind of a war memorial. Whenever we have our Remembrance Day ceremonies and things, they're done here, and people will lay wreaths at this place. But it's surrounded by park, and it's in the middle of the city. It's surrounded by park and a war memorial. So there's like lots of grass and hills that you can kind of see them all going down. When the fighting is going on, but around them you can see like the buildings and the cityscape. So it's like the perfect place for this. You know what I mean?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
So then we get to Rip Hunter. He's begging the Time Masters to be allowed to go and change history because Vandal Savage has risen to power and has taken over the world, and he's a terrible despot and murderer. And the Time Masters, are telling Rip Hunter, nope, sorry, we don't get involved. We just maintain the timeline. Now,
are they okay? Yeah. Before you get to, are they again? As I said, I have more of a Marvel lore.
Travis, always interrupt me. Just always interrupt me.
You got it. I have more. I know more Marvel lore. So, what would you compare the Time Masters to, like Uatu, the Watcher?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Is there a Marvel parallel?
There probably is, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. But the Time Masters were introduced. Time for Johnny's deep geek geek dive. I had a tooth pulled, everybody.
Yeah,
I had a molar pulled on Thursday. So, and I was committed to getting through. I wanted to get this show done. So, just the tongue twisters are going to be tough for a few days. The Time Masters were introduced in Superman comics in the early 90s. And it's pretty much this. They existed out of time at a place called Vanishing Point, which is where they are here. It exists out of time. Mm-hmm. And they maintain the timeline, and they have, agents who go out and make sure that everything's okay with the timeline. So that's established. But speaking of Doctor Who, if you were even remotely familiar with Doctor Who, and you start watching this show and you go, Time Masters, because on Doctor Who they're Time Lords.
Right.
So there's a lot of like, huh? I'm like, no, this was from the comics. It's okay. Mm-hmm. But you have it. And this is as far as the Easter eggs go. The Easter eggs for comic book geeks. There's one right here. And this is when I first watched the show, I knew I was going to be happy because Rip Hunter is listing the great despots of throughout history. He goes, Caesar, Hitler, Perdegaton. None are as bad as Vandal Savage. And Perdegaton is a famous DC ultra bad guy.
That's cool.
Who was in many crossovers between the Justice Society and the Justice League of America.
Yeah. So they're just throwing this one in. So it's kind of like, who the fuck? Okay, whatever. If nobody.
You are not as familiar with comic books as I was. You would have no idea who Perdegaton is. Spoiler: we meet him later on this season.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, then that's awesome. Then they probably had that sorted out. I think for me, like, okay, in Seinfeld when George is giving the marine biologist speech, and he tells Jerry that the sea was angry that day, my friend, like an old man trying to return soup at a deli, and Jerry makes a face I love Jerry makes the people talk about his acting not being good, but I even throw in these little subtle things. He makes a face that says so much, like it's like 3 or 4 expressions after another that says, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Whatever, keep going. Like that's gonna be me for a lot of this show until you can explain these things to me, Johnny. I appreciate it.
That's how we're gonna go. Eventually, you're gonna remember all this shit, and we're gonna mold to the team that this team eventually becomes.
That's
and perfect. You never have to apologize for an aside, because I'm gonna go. Who says Jerry Seinfeld was a bad actor on that show? I thought he was great.
So did I. But I remember at the time it would always be like, they even joked about it in when they're filming the pilot, like, he can't act. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think my favorite was for your Seinfeld moment, everybody, is when he could barely keep it together for the one with the triangles and the junior mint. Yes. And he just trying to get out the line. Let's go watch him cut this fat bastard up. And he can't.
Oh my God!
I don't know how many takes they did, but the only one they kept, he was still
kind of laughing. Yeah. Oh man, you're right. An all-time great line. Yeah. Okay, this will be a good tally. How many of those we touch on as we go here? I can tell. Continuing.
Guys, listeners, I actually sat down and I was like, I really want to make a structured show. And then I thought, I'm like, you're talking about yourself. Yeah. It's never going to happen. Anyone who's ever listened to me podcast or do internet radio over the last 15 years knows that format is not my style.
Yeah, whatever.
So we're introduced then to Gideon. Because Rip Hunter gets on the ship, the Wave Rider. Also a tip of the hat to an obscure DC time-traveling superhero named Wave Rider. Who becomes a time master. It all ties together, man. It all ties together. And we're introduced to Gideon, a sexy British voice, who helps Rip Hunter run the Wave Rider. And he decides he needs to go and gather a quote-unquote elite team. And one by one, we're introduced to our team, the Legends. And I'm going to introduce each one, and I'm going to ask you, Travis. I know you see more of a Marvel dude.
Yeah, but I'm no chump when it comes to DC. When it comes to DC, look.
Throw down, my nerd card on you. I ask you what familiarity you have with the characters.
Yeah, so works for me.
First, we're introduced to is Brandon Routh.
Yeah.
Who many people remember as having played Superman in that terrible Superman Returns, but he was great.
Yeah, and I didn't think it was terrible. It had like really great moments. You know who I didn't like in that movie? It was Kevin Spacey. I thought he was miscast.
I did not care for. Well, here's the thing with Kevin Spacey. I can't watch anything with Kevin Spacey in it now and go,
why?
Oh,
what happened?
Yeah. That stupid Pay It Forward movie. Yeah. After that, fuck you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But Brandon Routh doing his best Christopher Reeve impression movie is great. Yeah, sure. But here's my other problem with that movie, and I'm going to steal a line from Kevin Smith.
Okay.
So when was Lois Lane going to go, when did you rape me, Superman? She's like, wait a minute. I had a kid, and it's a super kid? That she...
Really? Like, so, okay, so, I guess. Like, what are they supposed to think that she didn't know that they got together?
Yeah, that was
I know, yeah, that part was silly. Like, I just remember, I saw it in that, I remember it was early, this is like when I first met my wife, when that movie came out. We went, and that was when the 3D was still a new thing in movies too, and I remember the plane scene was excellent. I remember that really stood out, where he lands it in a baseball diamond. Like, that's so, like, perfect, right out of a Superman thing, right? And I thought, you're right, he was great. I didn't find the ending really satisfying, but you talked about okay, get into it. Basically, he's the Atom. I know who the Atom is.
He's the Atom, who they introduced on Arrow. He's been a recurring character on Arrow. Ray Palmer, the Atom. But speaking of Iron Man again, at first, and then even in here, in the comics, Atom just shrinks. That's his power. He shrinks. On this show, he shrinks and he's Iron Man. You'll notice, because they need something more than shrinking.
Right. Was that right at the beginning? Like, I didn't really notice that so much in this one. Does that become something they figure out? They got to develop as we go.
Here's another thing you'll see: less and less use of the actual superpowers, and less costumes.
Right.
Even getting rid of the superhero and supervillain names. Even the show just completely. Yeah, you'll see it in the season, and a lot of it is completely for budget reasons.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I get it. And I think you got to go big for your first. This was pilot. We're talking about the first 2 episodes here.
Yeah.
Pilots, part 1 and part 2.
Yeah. The creatively named pilots 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Which is another thing. A couple seasons in, and they're really creative with the names of each episode. It's not so much this season.
Yeah. All right. Finding their legs.
So then it cuts to, that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where Indy finds Mary in Nepal. No, I'm sorry. That's just what they were ripping off. In this scene, as we find Sarah Lance, who's going to be the former Black Canary and assassin of the League of Assassins, who's been resurrected using the Lazarus Pit, which has left her with a murder lust she's trying to control.
As one gets.
Yeah,
I mean, I think we're all thinking about it that during quarantine, we're all getting some form of murder lust.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm new Black Canary, of course. Goodness gracious, Black Canary.
Yeah.
But I did not know there was a White Canary.
Well, there wasn't, and then they introduced the canaries, the canary conundrum, as it were, on this show. There are on these shows. There's been lots of black canaries.
That sounds like an Adam West Batman era episode title.
Yeah,
the Canary Conundrum.
Robin, I believe there's 3 black canaries.
Holy harmonizing howlets. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a noise that the canaries would make when they sing.
But so she's in a bar in Nepal and she fucks up a bunch of people. And if you watch Arrow, she was a major character on Arrow for a few seasons. And so one by one, as we're introducing all the characters, they keep meeting Rip Hunter, who pulls out a gun and flashes, which is, there's a lot on this show. Is this a ripoff or an homage?
Mm-hmm.
This is the ripoff. It's flat out Men in Black.
Yeah.
They flat out have the Men in Black memory wipers.
Sure.
So that's what he's doing here. So he's gathered the Atom. He's now gathered the White Canary.
Mm-hmm.
Next we meet Firestorm. Now I know you told me you were familiar with Firestorm.
Yeah. One of my favorites. Probably one of my favorite DC definitely costumes growing up. I didn't know much about him. I think you mentioned the Flash being one of your favorites. He was probably my favorite DC hero growing up. But I don't know Firestorm. I couldn't tell you a single Firestorm. I mean, I probably read one. I probably had some Justice League comics around when I was a kid that he was probably around in, or something like that, from like the early 80s.
Oh yeah, I was a huge Firestorm fan for like the first 20 issues of the run, and then that was right around the same time I stopped buying comic books.
Yeah, I can totally see like a George Perez, like the image of, not this Firestorm obviously, but like I can see like a George Perez drawing of Firestorm when I think of him in my head. You know what I mean?
So for people who may not know, Firestorm is 2 people, and it's Professor Martin Stein and originally Robbie Raymond, who they did have on The Flash, and he dies. And so this is the second person to become Firestorm with Martin Stein.
So this is always in the comics, Firestorm is 2 people?
Yes.
Wow.
Always 2 people.
That I didn't know.
And when they combine, they become Firestorm, and Jackson, the young guy, is the body, but you hear the voice of Martin advising him. In the comics, they literally draw like a ghost head next to him during stuff. So you got them, and then we're introduced to the Hawks, and the Hawks are literally the backdoor pilot of getting the show going.
Right.
Because, oh boy, this is the part of the show where it's going to be, where I'm just going to fast forward through stuff and just say just more Hawks bullshit.
Yeah.
Because this is the stuff that drags on the show, and sadly, it's the main plot line of the show.
Of the first 2, of these first 2 episodes for sure. I mean, I mean, we can skip forward to like you're introducing the 2 Hawks, but there's only one.
Yes, well, they introduced the 2 Hawkgirl and Hawkman, who have been reincarnated throughout history. And Vandal Savage is immortal. They get reincarnated. Vandal Savage always kills them, and that's how he stays immortal. And that's how they've gone through history. And they've explained all this on The Flash and Arrow. They go through it again here.
Is that from DC lore as well, or is that something?
No, that's not. This is them
Yeah.
taking the fact of them being immortal. Yes, but Vandal Savage was not part
Having
of
a
it.
connection. Okay. No. Okay.
Yeah, no, that was not part of it. And by the way, you want convoluted histories? Hawkman, Hawkgirl, DC Comics. It's the most convoluted thing there ever. You can't even possibly explain it.
Oh, you know, I
So,
want that.
oof. If anybody
Anyway.
listening can come up with the actual timeline of how they explain the Hawks, because it goes from ancient Egypt to outer space. It's fucking crazy.
I mean, I don't want to. I want you to keep going, getting through this. I mean, like I have thoughts about
Keep
everything
going,
we've
keep
talked
going.
about for a while. I don't want to get into the actors too much yet, but we will. But so far,
No, this is what I'm about to. Because
well, I mean, I was going
up,
to say, like, first of all, the woman who plays White Canary, she looks like a star. Like right away, she feels like somebody who has that it factor.
Yes.
But then when you, gosh, she couldn't have picked two polar opposites. Oh, and Brandon Routh, of course. You want to talk about the Maida stuff when he's introduced there. I think I had talked to you about this earlier, and he talks about how I was around, I was a hero, I died, and nobody cared. And which is kind of like what happened with Superman Returns. Like, he kind of dies in that movie, and then nobody gave a shit about Brandon Routh. I don't think, like, that movie wasn't a flop. Like, I think it did.
It made money, but it was critically shit on, and everyone looked at it as a failure.
But like, and there was no fault of his, but like he never maintained that like leading man status, that's for sure. So that felt like, to me, he was kind of, that was the first time already. I think even if I would have seen that speech separately, it kind of made me think about, did you ever see that Jean-Claude Van Damme film he made late in his career just called JCVD?
I've heard of it.
And he has like this one long speech at the end that is so just like him just apologizing for him and who he is, and it is so self-aware and painful. It's not that, like, this Brandon Routh thing was like, if I had just seen just that clip from a show, I'd be like, wow, like somebody's being mean to Brandon Routh putting this into the movie. I died, nobody cared.
Well, that's the thing. On Arrow, he was presumed dead, and then later in the season.
Yeah, so it's cool how that way. Yeah,
But he also Brandon Routh jumps off at screen as a star. You're absolutely right about White Canary. Sarah Lance, the actress's name is Katie Lotz, and also it's no surprise she becomes the star of this show. I'm pretty convinced. I've never read it, but I'm convinced that they were looking for a star vehicle for her.
Hey, you might be right. You might be right.
It quickly becomes that, the show quickly, and she just jumps off the screen.
Yeah.
Now, who doesn't jump off the screen? And by the way, Firestorm, Victor Garber is Martin Stein.
Yeah,
he's one of those. He's in this.
Yeah, character actor. Yeah.
He's
Mr. Andrews. Yeah.
He's a Tony Award winner.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Titanic. He was the captain.
You don't fuck around. He's Canadian, that actor, Victor Garber.
Of course. Well, what more can be said?
Yeah.
Now, who doesn't jump off the screen are Hawkman and Hawkgirl.
Yeah, just atrocious.
It's funny. I looked up their IMDb, and Sierra Renee, who plays Hawkgirl, is a well-regarded Broadway musical actress. She's played Mary Magdalene in Jesus Christ Superstar, and she's been Ilsa in Frozen on Broadway. Sadly, she doesn't get a chance to sing on this show.
Yeah, but I can see that. Like, she's got like those kind of, her eyebrows drive me fucking crazy, and they just don't. And she's just so she uses them the way that you do in like big musicals. Yeah, which is fine for, I can imagine. Yeah, that might work. I'm surprised to hear that. But, oh, man, with the two of them, it's like you're waiting for, like, it's almost like the Brazzers logo you're expecting to see on the bottom. You know what I mean?
Okay, someone needs to make that, because this scene ends with a different scene. Because the gist of it is, once again, they explain their immortal, beloved bullshit, and they have to get Vandal Savage, and Hawkman wants to go. Oh, no, that's later. I'm sorry. That's later. We'll get to that one later. They just, they're on a mission, and you get this great line of dialogue from the guy who plays Hawkman, whose name is Falk Henschel, and he's got a nice little resume on IMDb. I mean, he's a working actor, he's out there, but boy, This fucking character. He
Yeah.
he says, "You, my love, almost got us killed." I was like, oof. And the
Yeah.
Hawks. And here's another thing I've learned. I've seen it try to be done. There's no way to make the Hawkman and Hawkwoman costumes look good in real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. They do a great job on these shows of making these costumes look believable.
Yeah.
Not the Hawks.
No, yeah. You can feel the like Nerf or like yoga mat material that they put the thing together with.
And there's other scenes where everyone's just kind of walking around or in like, because the big thing about this show is they go undercover all the time, so they're not in their costumes. So when the Hawks are walking around in their leather costumes with their metal masks, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. But so then we meet my favorite characters, because it's not just heroes, it's villains on this show.
Yep.
And Captain Cold and Heatwave from The Flash.
Yep.
And Captain Cold's got a cold gun. Heatwave has a fire gun. Leonard Snart and Mick Rory. And
did they mention the names Captain Cold and Heatwave at any point in this?
No, they do not.
So I hadn't made that connection until you told me. But yeah, I know who those two are. I wouldn't have known them. I wouldn't have known their alter egos. I wouldn't have known their other identities.
And they're played by Wentworth Miller and Dominic Purcell, who are both tremendous actors, and many people remember them as the stars of Prison Break.
Mm-hmm.
So they were cast as these partners on purpose. That was stunt casting, and they're wonderful. But they're first introduced robbing a bank and shooting cops, where you get Mick going, "Fry, you little piggy."
Yeah. Yeah.
And the most impressions on this show are going to be me doing Heatwave and me doing Captain Cold. So, Travis, any impressions you want to do?
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. If one strikes me, I'm not adverse to it.
Okay. So then they all wake up on a rooftop with Rip Hunter, and he's explaining, what he needs them for.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're getting the band together kind of thing. Scene. Yeah.
Yeah. And they talk about dying and coming. Oh, they're talking about being resurrected. The Hawks are giving their whole resurrection bullshit. And Sarah gets in the line, "Yeah, I've done that." And so jumps off the screen because, she's died and been resurrected. Yeah. Okay. And the gist of it is Rip Hunter is selling them that in the future, when they complete their heroics, they will be remembered as legends.
Right.
And shows them that 150 years from now, the world is devastated. And he sends them on their way to decide if they want to come along.
But they also meet, like, they make the connection, which, I mean, it's a weird connection to make. Well, they're like, well, that means we die, right? Which, sure, yes. Fine, whatever. I guess. But for the purpose of this, for the purpose of this at that time, I'm like, okay, that's great, right? They all have these different, like, issues with, how do I fit in? I'm a superhero that didn't quite, they're all different kinds of round pegs and square holes kind of thing, right?
They're all misfits.
Yeah, and they have to figure out, okay, well, do I want to be this sacrificial lamb? But I mean, we do find out later that that's not even what it is.
Yeah. So next scene, because you really need to load this up with the people who are going to bring attention to a spinoff like this. So yet another scene with Green Arrow, played by Stephen Amell, who I don't know how familiar you are with his work. I watched him start off as a pretty stiff actor.
Yeah. I'm more familiar with his work against Neville at the time, and then later against Christopher Daniels. That's my his two wrestling matches than I am with his actual acting.
All right, there's your wrestling content, PWO. So don't fucking at me, okay? There you go.
Yeah.
So he's talking to Ray, of course, and trying to get help Ray make a decision. Arrow is, by the way, battling the goons of that season's bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
They were called the Ghosts.
Nice.
And which we'll get to, because in the next episode you're gonna meet the bad guy from this season of Arrow. And then there's more Hawks bullshit, but this is the one whether they're going to argue should they go or not. Shiera or Kendra. She's Kendra, but her Egyptian name is Shiera.
Yeah.
And Hawkman is Carter Hall or Prince Khufu.
Oh, God. This was all, like, honestly, that was all the worst of, all of the Hawk stuff was the worst of these 2 episodes.
It is so bad.
Aside from this, like, the stuff with her father, or was it his dad? Son, or, what the fuck, man? Like, it's just, like, I'm willing to go along with you on, like, this time travel. Okay, now we're going to be here, we're going to be wearing different outfits, and we got to remember this, and there's these rules. But then you're going to throw in on top of that these different lives that your character has, and then you're starting to lose me. You know what I mean? And I'm a guy who's a pretty patient guy, you know, when it comes to that kind of bullshit. But I think you got it when it comes to that kind of stuff, it's got to be one or the other, man. You can't start crowding because then because you're asking your audience to remember, you know, it's like you're creating a world, right? And here's a world where time travel is possible. But, so it's okay, but there are rules, right? Because every time there's time travel, you got to learn the new rules with time travel and any sort of thing. But especially in a pilot, you can't also bring up these other rules with people who have had the same lives throughout history.
Yeah.
Like, then it's just I think you're asking too much of your audience there. That's why I think, like, dude, there's some moments here like you say that it's a train wreck. There are, like, some killer moments that happen in these first 2 scenes, or first 2 episodes that I think are enough that even with this the Hawk stuff, I would have stuck around. But the Hawk stuff, because it has these killer moments, really stand out like a sore thumb.
And what really stands out like a sore thumb, and this is where we need the Brazzers logo for the still, is this scene, because she doesn't want to go on the spaceship with the time traveling spaceship. Carter wants to do it because this is their chance to finally get rid of Savage, and they decide they'll have a fight in their living room of their apartment, and if he wins, they go. And he's like, a battle, my love. And here's the thing, she's not in love with him because she doesn't remember any of this shit. He does. Yeah. And so the scene ends with them both jumping up into the air and their wings coming out of their backs. And I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? They're flying inside this tiny, cozy studio apartment. It's terrible.
And then later they show up. So I guess he kicked her ass.
Yeah, that was it. They just said, I guess I won.
I guess he beat the shit out of her. That's awesome. Good. Here we go, guys.
All right, get on the goddamn time ship, bitch.
Yeah, here's our heroes, guys. They've all got their quirks.
So then we have a truly lovely scene of Sarah Lance with her sister, Laurel Lance, who at this point is the Black Canary. Mm-hmm. And they're in the bunker of Team Arrow. And they're having whenever these two get to act together, it's wonderful. It doesn't happen all that often on these shows, but whenever they get a chance to act together, they're great together. So, you know, you got Sarah. She's like, I don't know, I have to recreate myself. And Laurel goes, maybe you don't have to be the Black Canary. You can be the White Canary. Mm-hmm. And she's got a suit for her. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, where'd you get this from? She goes, I have a friend named Cisco. Cisco is a character on The Flash who is the character who makes everybody's outfits and gives them nicknames. Right. You know, that's just been established as what he does. So that was a nice little touch. Okay. And I like that she said, well, where's the mask? And she's like, you don't need a mask. Yeah. And I was like, and again, I'm like, wow, this is good stuff. You're exactly right. You know, especially in these first season, it's a lot of picking and choosing, like, this Hawk shit, you toss that. What are we going to keep? Everything Katie Lotz, because she's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And then we have, Mick Rory and Leonard Snart. Because, of course, Rory doesn't want to go, Travis. Why would he want to go? Yeah. And Snart goes, because they're not heroes. He's like, fuck that, you know, we're bad guys. And you get the great line Wentworth Miller could see is like, "Don't you see, Mick? This is what we got into thieving for."
Yeah. Just like
And
a piece of steak. Every line is like a good like
I
just
know
dig in, brah, dig in.
he is having so much fun with this character that he gets to play throughout these shows. And it's a little of an aside because I know a little bit about Wentworth Miller, and he's had a bit of a hard time. Uh, he had a bit of a hard time being an out actor.
Yeah.
Not so much humor, but he had weight issues, and he's dealt with online assholes and mental issues and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So for him to get to just take a role like this and douse it in A1 barbecue sauce and just
that's great.
And
that's
just
awesome.
have a good time. And
I don't know if you know this, Johnny. I'm in international education where I have a lot of it's primarily, and I mean right now the school I'm at is 100% Chinese. But Prison Break was huge in Asia, and like this was like 5 years ago. He was beloved. The Asian kids loved him, especially the girls. But I wonder if that. I wonder how much they've been following him like since, right? Because I mean, he's not the because when that show was it was a modest success. It wasn't huge success in the States, but it's funny when I hear about what clicks over there and who they recognize and who they know. But just a weird.
I like to see him say, "Sorry, ladies. Wentworth Miller plays on the other side of the street." How about me?
Yeah. What about this captain? You're leaving this captain a little cold.
So now we get to Firestorm. Basically, long story short, Jax doesn't want to go because he's a 20-year-old. How many times do you have to hear, "I'm just a 20-year-old mechanic. Yeah. I'm just a 20-year-old mechanic." Yeah. And let's say that 5 times in the pilot. And basically, Martinstein roofies him.
Yeah, that was wild.
And
that was nuts.
That's it. And he's like, "Nope, we're going."
Yeah.
Because they have to be together. They every now and then they have to become Firestorm or they'll die.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was interesting. I remember the first time we talked was after I had watched the first episode of this 2-part pilot, and I felt the first episode, when you see most of these things, like this isn't the first time a TV show has split up its pilot into 2 parts, because usually they shoot a 90-minute pilot. Like that happens a lot with sci-fi shows in general. But these are both kind of self-contained, and I was kind of surprised when I watched the first one. But then when I watched the second one, I think they do kind of complement each other, even though they do have their self-contained stories more than these usual pilots that are split up into 2 parts. I think they did right by kind of wrapping this up as like, this is your first kind of full origin, because it did feel like at the end of the first episode, I mean, we'll get to it, but I felt like, all right, here's our squad. But then something else happens in the second one, and it also with the Firestorm guy, with the Firestorm dynamic, mentor and kind of student or father figure, looker upper to, they kind of switch in the second half, right? In the second episode.
Yeah.
Where Victor Garber has to sort through his own insecurities and stuff. So, as much as I did think that first one was self-contained, and it is, this really it does wrap up and kind of set up who these guys are and how everything, their relationships between each other. It's good. I loved it. And also, as I said, we lose a Hawk by the end too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, we just keep saying Hawkman don't make it through the fucking pilot. Everybody, okay? Just it's not a fucking surprise.
Yeah.
We're doing a recap show of a show from 4 years ago. Don't worry about the spoilies.
Yeah.
But no, Victor Garber and that young actor, his name is Franz Draman, and they've got a wonderful relationship.
Yeah.
They're fantastic together on screen.
Yeah, it's unique. I mean, you do see that kind of like somebody who looks up to a professor who I have to. What do you think, Professor? How are we gonna get out of this one? He's the Sherman to his Peabody. And
he's British. Franz is British, doing an African American accent.
Interesting.
And
cool.
When I found out he was British, I was like, "Are you for real?" I couldn't even. He never slips. He never breaks.
Yeah. It's good, yeah. But yeah, no, that is an interesting dynamic for sure. Those two actors and those two characters.
Yes. And who also has a great dynamic with Victor Garber, Martin Stein, and this is just teased upon in this episode, is that Ray Palmer, the Atom, he meets Stein. He's like, "Don't you remember? I was your student." He's like, "I don't remember you." Like, I don't remember the famous tech billionaire Ray Palmer who was my student.
That's
so
funny.
because Ray is famous in this world. He's the sexy superhero Bill Gates of this world.
Right.
So they decide they're going to go, and then they're attacked by a man in a Darth Vader kind of armor outfit, and his name is Kronos. Now this is fun because the Atom was one of those characters in the comics that was such a tertiary type character, but even he had his arch enemies, and his arch enemy was Kronos, who was who was one of the lamer looking villains of all time. Like he had like a clock painted on his head or some shit. It was the 60s, man.
Yeah.
And so
is the Atom a Golden Age character or Silver Age?
Well, boy, here we go. So time for more deep dive geek.
Why I'm here.
The Golden Age Atom was named Al Pratt, and he was a short, muscular wrestler who was just a really badass fighter. Okay, you know a little bit of Alpha Flight, I would imagine, being Canadia's premier.
We're required. It's like in the citizenship test.
Okay. Picture. You know what? I think we should pitch this show to Kevin Smith's podcast network because I think that's far more along those lines. But yeah, he's the Golden Age Puck. He wasn't a total midget / little person, but he was real short and muscular and a badass, and he wore a mask and a cape and a weird little outfit. And then when they rebooted the characters in the 50s, which created the Silver Age in DC, the Atom was Ray Palmer, guy who shrinks down to microscopic sizes.
Yeah, cool.
So, and then this is the first time we get to hear the nickname that Mick Rory comes up, because he comes up with nicknames for every character over the course of this show. And his nickname for Ray Palmer, as he's telling him to get out of the way, "Hey, haircut. Get out of the way."
Hey,
Ray is haircut.
That's good.
and then we see they spare no expense for music licensing on the show, because they got to go to the 70s, and suddenly I'm hearing Shining Star.
Yeah.
Like, "It's a shining star."
Yeah.
And there's a few of those in this pilot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, I did notice. Yeah, a couple. Like, I was gonna ask, like, do the songs that they have to spend licensing on show up often?
They pop up a lot on these shows, especially this one. They the show at this point in its run, like modern run, they'd rather spend money on a good song than on dopey special effects for something that doesn't.
And I guess, like, especially if you're like, well, we're off to 1983, and then all of a sudden it's like, sometimes I feel I've got to boom boom get away. They're just like cutting to the shots of, like, fluorescent sunglasses and piano ties and shit. I get it.
I had a piano tie. I have to admit.
Nice.
So, boy, this Hawks bullshit. So they got to find this expert, Professor Boardman.
Yeah. And
they find Professor Boardman, and he's this older gentleman, scholar, and he's been studying Vandal Savage and forever. And so, long story short, he's their son from their previous life. And boy, this actor, he's out doing it. He's doing it. Yeah,
I'm trying to think of who he reminds me of, or who they were going for, but just like in terms of like the full design. He
sounds like someone who should be delivering exposition in a bad Indiana Jones movie.
Sure. Yeah. That's totally it. Yeah. Yeah.
So he explains the whole point of how they're connected. We've already got into that, but it's the actor's timbre of his voice. He's like, "And you are my mother."
Just stopping stuff cold, man. Every time, it's like when you're feeling this good energy and like what I assume is this, this level of fun that you talk about amongst the cast and like the story and everything, and then all of a sudden it'll get to this, and you're just like, what are you doing?
Oh, well, good enough. They kill him too.
Yeah.
So apparently, Vandal Savage, how many dollars to donuts in the course of us doing this first season, how many times you or I are going to accidentally call him Randy Savage?
That's what I was thinking when you were talking about like the when they were introducing all the monsters throughout history. It'll be like Caesar, Hitler, Savage, and they just have a slow zoom on Macho of some live shot of him taking out some still photo of him taking out Steamboat's throat with the bell.
Ooh, Shire, my immortal beloved. Once again, we find ourselves in this dance of death.
I love it.
But so he's apparently Zelig.
Yeah, totally, right? Especially with the way that they're editing his face into those pictures.
Yeah, he's been slowly appearing throughout history, orchestrating chaos and world wars and everything. And they show now for a guy who's been hiding through history, he's easily found with a magnifying glass and an old black and white picture. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
He's background. He's the evil Forrest Gump.
Yes. Very good. Yeah.
And so, gosh, then what happens? So Kronos attacks again. Jax has to do some shit. But throughout all this, more and more, Katie Lotz, Sarah Lance is just jumping off the screen as definite the person having the most fun and maybe the best actor.
and looks maybe and looks great in that when they go to the 70s, she looks fantastic.
And also, her character, as we'll find out, her character is bisexual / leans more towards women. And that's another thing about these shows on the CW.
Yeah.
They are the most diverse shows.
And progressive.
Yeah. There are so many LGBTQ characters on these shows. It's wonderful. And none of it is forced. None of it's forced down your throat. It's
definitely thinking about like like Ruby Rose and Batwoman.
Yeah. I mean, every now Supergirl will get very preachy sometimes, but that's what that character should do. That she's Supergirl.
Sure.
So they get attacked by Kronos again. Everything's going fucking bad. Professor Boardman gets fucking blown up. And then we get. I mean, my favorite part of each one of these shows we do is what's the best Wentworth Miller line. I'm calling Wentworth Miller is a national treasure because Shira has had enough, and she like throws Rip up against the wall, and she wants to know what the real fucking truth is with this mission. And as you pointed out, Wentworth Miller, he's sitting down.
Yeah.
He makes sure to stand up just to deliver the line, and then he sits back.
Go hit it, man. Hit it.
He says, "You better tell it faster, Rip, because it doesn't look like the lady is in a patient mood."
It's fantastic. It's like old film noir, man. It's like Billy Wilder stuff.
Right out of Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, big time.
I died in the pool.
Yeah.
So basically, this is the twist that really grabbed me and grabbed a lot of people. Rip was lying to them about being legends. That's how he sold them this. He actually picked them because their lives have no effect on the timeline, whether they live or die. Now, that's kind of funny since Ray Palmer is a rich, famous tech giant, who employs millions of people at some point on the show, but fine, whatever. And that's why he picked them. So 100 years in the future, they'd have no effect. And then he finally tells them why he's after Savage, that they killed his family. And there's a slow fade to him finding his dead son. I have a dead son.
Yeah.
He chews some scenery. Arthur Darvill is a scenery chewing motherfucker.
Yeah.
in a wonderful way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, his look is, yeah. Anyways, keep going.
So there's some more Hawks bullshit. And a great scene with Stein and Jax where, they come together on, he's apologizing for bringing him on here, and Jax is still pissed, but, they're coming together. And you'll get this on all these shows. There's always a great moment where Jax and Stein teach each other something. And watching those two act is great. Then we get to see the bad crew, Sarah, the assassin, Heatwave, and Captain Cold. Yeah. And Ray, who is the ultimate good guy. And that's what you'll see he evolves into throughout the show, is Ray Palmer is the ultimate hero.
Right, the Boy Scout.
He is the Boy Scout. He is
which you need. You need that in a team dynamic in some form or another, right?
Yes.
It's like for so long. It's why, again, here's our Venn diagram of wrestling show. It's why John Cena had to be the main guy for so long, or why you just needed a John Cena, right, for so long, right? Then there's the people who hated you need the Superman, you need the Captain America, who just has to, you can't have a roster full of Wolverines. Come on.
Yes. Oh, Ray on this show eventually evolves into to the point of it's comical. Mm-hmm. But Brendan Routh pulls everything off so well. It's so charming. But you start seeing he's bonding with the bad crew.
Yeah,
because it's like an outsider. He feels lied to, and the slow bonding you'll see between him, Rory, and Snart,
right,
is a lot of fun. It's one of the It's one of the best parts of season 1.
Cool, and that's good. And it's it's because he's starting to understand the shades of gray.
Yeah, shades of gray, Raymond. Raymond. Yeah, basically, Captain Cold doesn't call him Ray like everyone else. He's like Raymond.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. See, at first with Wentworth Miller, because I knew that I knew about Prison Break, right? And I knew that he was like a star of a moment for a while there, right? Everybody thought this guy was something. Yep. And you mentioned his personal struggles and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't know about that. But when I first saw him show up, I almost kind of thought, in his first couple reads, I'm like, is this guy not taking this seriously? Is this guy kind of what especially happened with the X-Men movies later, how Halle Berry just dropped her accent and she didn't care anymore, and she just it was she felt you could tell it seemed like she was above it in her performance. You could see it, you know what I mean? And at first I was kind of is this guy kind of thinking okay, yeah, I'll do your silly little superhero thing, but the more you watch it, ooh, this guy is committed more than anybody in this motherfucker.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. And the thing is, if you the Flash, you'd know that because he'd already been this recurring. Cool. He'd been recurring on the Flash for a while, and he just chews his teeth into this fucking character.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so fun, man.
Yep. So they decide, what are they gonna do? And they decide, fuck it, let's go. Let's go try to take out Vandal Savage. And with Rory getting off the line, I like killing people. Because Mick, Rory, and Captain Cold at this point in these shows are fucking murderers.
Yeah, yeah.
They murder people on these shows. And watching Mick over the course of these seasons go from a guy who talks about how he likes to kill and fry the pigs to becoming the most beloved character, which he eventually is. You can see it happening already.
Yeah, sure, sure.
But he becomes beloved on this show, a source of great comic relief.
All right, cool.
And initially he's like, I want to burn people alive. And so they're off to Norway, 1975. That's where Gideon has tracked Vandal Savage to. And this is where our go-home scene, Vandal Savage has a nuclear warhead.
Yeah.
And that's what the legends are off to stop.
Yeah. And that's
so what do you think?
1. And
that is.
It's a nice little especially if this is a guy who's going through history, as we said, he's through Zelig, and this feels even though we've just been introduced to this dude, this feels classic Savage. This guy now he's gone through. You know what I mean? He's got what else would he be? Now he's got the Ark of the Covenant. It's always going to be something, right? Based on what they established in that first 45 minutes. Yeah, that's why I felt. I said this felt like this was even though it's pilot part 1 of 2, this felt self-contained. Especially with that last reveal that you give me, that you just talked about, where it's like, oh shit, we don't turn out to be anybody, right? So, like they've already had their world shaken. Like, we gotta die to save the world, and it's kind of like, no, and it's like, yeah, they're kind of getting used to the idea of being heroes, and it's kind of like, oh shit, maybe we aren't even heroes. Maybe nobody gives a fuck about us. Maybe there is no point to this. And oh boy, I can relate to that. But no, like honestly, like there was a I think this is probably about 3 or 4 months ago. There was a Conan O'Brien interview where he talked about coming to the conclusion that, if we can get all fucking philosophical here for a second, coming to the conclusion about how inspirational it can be when you understand that life has no meaning, right? That none of this means anything that we're doing here and stuff, right? I think that kind of like that. This is the stuff that works, man. Like, because I was already on board if you said like that's enough of a concept for a full series, like, and you're all going to die at some point, but you'll be recognized as legends, right? And that could be enough. That could have been enough. Like, you could have seen, like, wow, like it could have been out of nowhere. Something happened in season 2 where you lose somebody, like, whoa, but he dies in a way that everyone's going to remember it, man. This guy was a legend, right? But then all of a sudden, like, and already you got something there, or I had something in my head, and I'm like, okay, this is good. You've laid the groundwork, they laid the foundation, but to then pull the rug out at the end of this thing and to say, yeah, you're coming to terms with being heroes. Well, how about coming to terms with being nobodies? What do you think of that?
Yeah,
that's killer. That's great, and that's what I thought. Like, all right, yeah, I'm totally on board.
So as we're at the end of the first episode, hey man, we did it.
Yeah, we did. We
did it. What do you think?
I like it. I mean, I'm like on board. I thought we were going to get through both of them, but there's not a chance tonight.
We're gonna record part 2 next. I just think we're gonna take a break and record part 2 next. We're gonna the podcast curtain back so people can take a break and get a drink. So I thought that went well. I hope you listeners enjoyed that. Like I said, we're finding our voice. This is going to be a conversation. I think that's the best way to explain this. Is going to be a conversation between friends who we're getting to know each other as well. We've only recorded together once before.
Yeah. It was a Lucha Afterground episode way back when I was still doing wrestling podcasts. And like, dude, honestly, I'll pump your tires for a second here. I'm a fan of your work. I don't know if Kelly's told you this, and I mentioned this to you, but I put on the Mystery Titans Theater that you guys do, whether it's just you and Parv, or you and Kelly, or Parv and Kelly, or the three of you just talking over old wrestling. That's like my security blanket. Like, I always fall asleep late at night. Or when I'm always up late at night, but I always need the TV on to help me fall asleep, and that'll be the last thing I put on. I find like an old Mystery Titans Theater where you guys are talking over wrestling. It just helps me. It's like rain against the window kind of thing to help me get to sleep at night.
The last here as you fade away.
Yeah. So dude, like. Fuck, Johnny! I'm thrilled to be working with you now. I'm excited.
Oh, great! I'm glad because when again, this is for all the listeners too, man. You know, you're trying to start something new, start something different, and you've never recorded with someone before, and you're trying to find that chemistry. I think mission accomplished. Yeah. So before we get on with, out of 5, I was going to give this episode a rating, but let's not do that. Let's not do fucking ratings.
I mean, I think it all pilots have their warts. And this part 1 of 2,
these warts have big phony wings on them.
Yeah. But in terms of especially what happens in the next one, and in terms of just laying ground rules, but still, like they're not recreating the wheel, but are doing enough to hook you in, right? And like I said, they had me hooked in enough with just saying you guys become legends, and I'm like, shit, that's the name of the goddamn show. Here we go. But then to change that again was a wrinkle I did not expect, and cool. And I'm like, all right, let's go.
All right. Well, before we go, do you have anything you want to plug?
Let me think. No. I've got nothing to do. I mean, I'm thinking I might start up another podcast on a band that I grew up loving.
In these times of isolation, have you watched anything recently that you'd recommend for other people?
Have you seen John Mulaney's Sack Lunch Bunch on Twitter? On Netflix? On Netflix?
I've been meaning to watch it.
That's something we've watched a couple times. Oh, we've all watched the Tiger King. Okay, here, I'll ask this question. This will be our send off to it. Did you watch Tiger King all the way through yet?
Not yet. I haven't watched it yet.
Okay, because that'll be my question for you. When you watch Tiger King, how many true blue baby faces in that entire series? And that's like 7 episodes, right? I want you to tell me, if any, baby faces in that whole show when you start.
All I know is that apparently there's a version of the Fabulous Freebirds if they were gay and married.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but dude, he's like someone made the Michael Hayes connection. That you can definitely see some aesthetic similarities. But dude, honestly, if you saw Michael Hayes outside of a wrestling environment now, would you think that was a straight man? Like the way this guy dresses all the time, like we know him from forever, and like going back to Worldcast. But if you saw this guy show up in like those outfits, I was like, oh hey, hi Michael.
It gives a whole new meaning to Bad Street.
Yeah.
All right, that has been the first episode of Gilmore Guys. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Gilmore Guys, Gideon Guys,
Gilmore Guys.
Yes, you did.
Holy shit! I'm so ripping them off that I'm literally just calling it Gilmore Guys. Thanks for listening to Gideon Guys here on the PWO Podcast Network. See you next time.
Adios.